so disrespectful. You know, meetings called public meetings called for 6 o'clock. Here it is, 6:10, and they just don't have their shit together. Did you punch it in?
Welcome, everybody, to the Rye-Town Park Commission meeting of September 20th, 2022. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Debbie, please call the roll.
Yes, Commissioner Jackson,
Here.
Commissioner Cohn,
Here.
Commissioner Klein,
Here.
Commissioner Hurd,
Here.
Commissioner Marino is absent, President Zuckerman.
Here. First item of business is approving the minutes of August 16th. I think Debbie made some minor changes. I hope everybody read them. They're not very complicated. Unless there are further additions or corrections, may I have a motion and a second to approve?
I was not present, so I abstain.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Debbie, do we have any public comment on non-agenda items?
You know something, I didn't open my cell phone, so I don't
Right.
know if there's anything on
All right.
Facebook.
We'll move on. A resolution to approve a request from Soul Riders for permission to tie the park pink at Rye-Town Park in October. This is something that we've done the last few years. I think everybody on this board feels that the Soul Riders are an exceptional group serving the entire area of the city of Rye and the town of Rye and surrounding areas as well. Does anybody want to make a comment on this project?
No, it's something I look forward to every year. They do a great job.
It's an excellent project, and I'm glad that the park is participating.
And a note that even more than last year, we have a natural burlap bow that is a sustainable item and environmentally much better than what was used in previous years.
Great.
So may I have a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, the next item, it's actually two items, part of the same thing, is the capital budget. I think the easiest, let's start with the first one. The Rye-Town Park Capital Plan, which is, the first page is pending grant funding. These projects are things we have already discussed. They are mostly a wish list item. Only,
Gary, can I ask you please to speak into your mic, because the people on Zoom are having trouble hearing.
I am speaking, my lips are 2 inches from the mic. I can't get much closer unless I eat it up. All of the items listed basically will hopefully require a zero local contribution. Some of them require minor contributions of approximately 10%. The only one that is a major issue is what we're calling the bathhouse exterior restoration, which is the shower area retaining wall and the exterior envelope, and also the beach level ADA restroom. The first two have, we've submitted grants through the CFA process through the Department of Parks and Historic Preservation, and the ADA restroom through the local waterfront revitalization program. The first requires a 50% match, the second only a 25% match. So those are the grants that we've requested. You can see, I'll just run them, the others very quickly. The pavilion, terracotta roofs, the tower building balcony pergola, replacing the tube fence on top of the seawall near the pavilion. We have storm mitigation projects such as the beach replenishment and the promenade erosion mitigation project and the pond culvert erosion mitigation project. We have for the following year projected, this is not subject yet to a grant application, it has previously, the parking lot restoration or reconstruction. Just one note, and I discussed some of this with Josh previously. Even though it's listed in 2023, these projects all have a 5-year life expectancy. When I say expectancy, we're permitted to do this over a 5-year period. So realistically, this may be a 2024 or a 2025 project, and it will be subject to the, obviously for the local match, to the capitalization budgets of both the city of Rye and the town of Rye. So before I go further, Debbie, do you want to have any comments on any of these?
I don't. I'm happy to answer questions.
I have a couple of quick questions. Just, you know, when you talk about the 5-year lifespan for capital, the two-way radios, are we,
The radios are not pending a grant.
okay.
There are 2 pages, Lindsay. One is the pending grant funding that we're going over, and the second one is the current capital plan, which includes what you're speaking about.
So I'd just like to emphasize the point that this list is grant dependent. That is, if we don't get the grants,
Correct.
then these projects get reassessed, rethought, rejiggered perhaps.
Yeah, that would be, if we don't get grants, then the commission would have to make a determination as to whether it wishes to fund these things through the normal funding process of the town and of the city. But that's down the road, and you know, we'll see what happens. One of the items that we would have to seriously consider doing that is the retaining wall reconstruction if we don't get a grant to do that, because that's approaching an emergency, and we'll have to look at that much more seriously after December when the grants are awarded and see if we get a grant.
December is when the grants are awarded.
Yeah.
And isn't that also including, or, you know, we do have the funds that are being offered by the Friends of Brighttown Park for the shower portion of the wall?
No, that's not for that. The Friends of Rye-Town Park contributed new showers, standalone showers, which we have to wait to install until we know what's happening with the retaining wall,
Wall.
because they're gonna go in the same area. We don't want to install them, then have to start to rip up the area around it and possibly endanger it.
I think there is a conversation to have with regard to our priorities. Steve Otis and Shelley Mayer have reached out to us to say that they are considering this year's SAM grants and have asked us to indicate what we would like to emphasize.
Yeah, we've given them a list, and all the ones that are on here are on that list. The question is what the priority is, and I think we have to wait on the final priority until we see what money, if any, we get on the bathhouse exterior, and then the commission can make a determination as to whether those priorities should change or not. We don't know how much money may be available from either Steve or Shelley. We've spoken with them, and they do want to give priority to Rye-Town Park. We have not asked for any funding. The town has not asked for any funding for Crawford Park this year, even though we have some projects that that may be appropriate. The town just got money to rebuild the walking trail around the park and to refurbish the playing fields at Crawford Park. So this year, we're concentrating on more money for Rye Town Park, and hopefully we'll get it.
So, Gary, the first page, the 2023 Rye-Town Park Capital Plan, that's not pending grants, that's what we have on the docket?
Yeah, let's get to that after we finish this, okay, Linz?
Mm-hmm.
So this is, okay, that's what is pending grant funding. If there are no other questions, let's move to the other one. The capital budget itself, this would be mostly for 2023. There are a couple of items that were pushed into 2024. Those could be moved back to 2023, or other items could be pushed into 2024. These are mostly the usual items that we would consider. It's under capital, but a lot of it may be considered kind of operational. You know, like video security upgrades, et cetera. The one controversial item that I would point out would be the bathhouse interior that we've spoken about many times before. There's a notation that the estimate is not final and is subject to further revision. We're speaking to the projected contractor with the idea of changing some of the specifications and also limiting the scope of work so that we can cut the total cost by a substantial amount. One of the reasons for the increased cost over previous estimates is that, and I've mentioned this in previous discussions, is that originally replacement of the windows was part of the exterior request, but we can't do anything in the interior at this point because the windows are in such bad condition that we need to make the entire interior watertight. So the cost for the windows may be as much as $200,000, which is got to be the first thing installed because everything else will depend on that. So once we do that, then we'll see potentially maybe we'll eliminate for the current project such things as making the permit office into that bathhouse building and just concentrate on the bathrooms themselves to refurbish those, making them, you know, moving the stalls, for example, to make them fully handicap accessible, and refurbishing the sinks and the floors and the walls.
So sorry, just so I understand, that bathhouse renovation includes moving the permit office?
Currently, it does. The
Okay.
original plan, Emily, was to move the permit office in there, reconfigure it all, put a new heating system in, you know, making that a year-round building for the staff of the permit office and the winter staff, et cetera. But, you know, that may have to wait because basically the grant money we got was the aim of it was to make the bathrooms themselves handicap accessible.
Right.
So that's got to be the thrust of it. But again, we can't really do the bathrooms and the walls of the bathrooms until we make the building watertight.
Right.
So that's got to be the thrust, and when we, hopefully by next month, we'll have a better idea of what the number is. And I know that it's important to the city as well as the town to know what kind of number would be expected as a local match for both entities to be able to put it in their capital plans for the future. And unlike the other list, this is a little bit time sensitive because we got these grants a few years ago, and if you'll remember, especially the CFA grant, we concentrated on the ramps and the path first. So those are already reconstructed. So we really need to make a final decision fairly early on this part of it.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is that we have grants that we could apply towards this project, but they are expiring.
Yeah, and the amount is, it's $100,000 from the CDBG, and the remaining consolidated funding, that's basically through Parks and Historic Preservation. The remaining number is about 82,000 and change, and that's because a lot of that was used up on the ramps and the path.
Can we use that for the ADA compliant bathroom down below?
No,
Why not?
because it wasn't granted for that.
What was it granted for?
The bathroom, in the bathhouse. You're talking about for the CFA to use for the tunnel bathrooms?
Yeah,
Yeah, that wasn't applied for. We had applied for that. I don't know, do we have current application on the CFA for that?
For
The
the
tunnel
Tunnel
bathrooms.
tunnel bathrooms, that we submitted to the local waterfront
Right,
revitalization
that's,
program.
right, okay, pardon me. I said that earlier. That
Right.
we've applied for the LWRP.
right, I guess what I'm trying to get at, is there a way for us to take the CDBG grant money and the ECF remaining grant money and put it towards something else?
No, those are locked in. And if we don't use it, we lose it.
To the point you've already made, Gary, the getting the costs down and then getting between our two lists here, that is capital plan and capital plan pending grant fund, getting the phasing of projects more firmly in mind will be very important, because if I look at bottom line numbers, at least right now, I would see a 2023 contribution just for capital, not including operating costs, to the park of $400,000 or so. And given the crunch that the city is in with its own CapEx program and its desire to not desire to dredge Milton Harbor, managing that sort of fund would be very, very difficult in our budget.
Josh, where are you getting 400,000? Because I'm looking at 1.4 million.
The first page, city ride contribution is 296,000.
Oh, but but this is just this is for the wish list. This isn't the actual.
Yeah, so it's actually closer if you put these together to 500,000.
Well, actually,
Wish list.
Yeah.
Actually, you'd have to look at that, because if we get the 850 whittled down, because the bathhouse alterations of 667, which would be the local share, based on 850 and subtracting the grants, that comes down to the bottom. If we whittle that 850 figure down, then that would change the bottom line. If you look at, I think you also need to look in terms of our capital needs on an individual basis, and what I'm going to do is suggest that each member of the commission look at the other items and question as to their need. All of these basically come from staff recommendations, and we're gonna have to get longer stalks, or get those button mics.
Hear me now.
That's what I said, Josh. You gotta go like this. So
Can I say, sorry.
let me just finish up. You can look at some of these things are like ordinary. It's like you have parkland, seed. You have a couple of vehicles on there. None of these are outrageously expensive, but they do add up. We discussed last year, adding a new parking pay station. That's on the list again. The commission may wish to defer it. The staff, it is my understanding, are, have reported that there have been very long lines at the pay stations and that we should have another one. These are all things that we need to discuss and make a decision on. Russ could be better explained, for example, the swing gate to control access at the overflow parking area. And we have, there's another gate that's buried. The parking lot control gate. So, there are all of these things. The one thing that I wanted to point out, the hot water heater for restrooms, that's for the ladies' tunnel bathroom, the one that works.
Right.
We got a violation from the Department of Health because it only had cold water, and they said you have to have hot water. So that's why that's there, and their notation was it had to be fixed by next season, or else they're not going to allow us to open the beach. That's not a large expense. They also, for your information, and I apologize because I had meant to send this to the commission and I forgot to do it, is that as part of that violation, they noticed the gate to the men's tunnel bathroom and the stairs falling down and the condition of the bathroom, and said we have to fix that too. Debbie was in contact with the inspector with the idea that, they had no idea we were making an application to do a complete renovation. So she's requested that we get an extension on that until we see what
The
can be.
inspector completely understood, but it was it's a decision above his pay grade. So I sent him the material and the backup, and I'm waiting for him to talk to his boss.
So, Gary, if I get this correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we're looking at the first page, which is the 2023 Rye-Town Park Capital Plan. This is
Correct.
separate and apart from the proposed or pending grant.
Right. The grants on this one, Lindsay,
Correct.
the grants on this
Have
one
already been
have
funded.
already been granted. The grants are granted, so that's why it's on this
Okay.
list. For example, the beach mats.
correct.
Okay,
So,
we've gotten the grant for the beach mats, but we haven't bought them yet because we're waiting on the county to sign a contract.
Right.
To sign a contract with the county. They won't sign the contract till they get a release of the CDBG funds from the federal government.
correct.
So we're waiting on that.
So to that point, when you look at the final contribution for both the city of Rye and the town of Rye, it's almost as if it's a la carte. If we prioritize certain projects, that those being obviously first and foremost the bathhouse interior, because we have the possibility of losing the grant, as well as the wheelchair beach mats, correct? So any other projects other than, I think, separate and apart from, you obviously explained the hot water heaters that are necessary for the restroom, we could choose to take out any or all of these other items to come to a solution that's more amenable to both the city and the town.
Yeah, but when you look at the three that you just mentioned, the mats, bathhouse, and the hot water heaters, we're talking about, I think, 90% of the cost right there.
I think a big number is this refurbished fountain.
Well, that's
For
for
40.
2024.
Right.
So that would be separate and apart from what, we're talking about for 2023, for this fiscal year. What I wanted to say is that we can sort of do our best to come to work out somewhere where we're both comfortable.
And I appreciate that. I think that what we're looking at is a wish list at the moment. That is,
There are certain things that I think are necessary that we
but
really have to do.
We will discuss
Yeah.
each of these things when it's time to actually approve it,
Mhm.
to approve the expenditure. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so really, I think that also addresses Lindsay's point. That is, as we go along, we can figure out what we need to do as a timing matter, and whether some of this needs to be put aside.
Yeah, I think that, for example, one thing that obviously we need is to seed the park. So I don't think that's like, okay, we got to do that. You know, we may, because of the minimal expense, we may want to make sure we get our two-way radios, things like that. Whether or not we do the parking pay station, I think that's a major question. We have almost every year, as well as the control gates. I think that what we need to do is have each of these that may come into question. I wouldn't suggest eliminating it, but some of the ones that the commission feels are less important now, to put them into a following year, but let the staff give a rationale as to why each of these is requested. In other words, what vehicle do we need? I believe that's mostly for parking enforcement. How important is that outboard motor? What are the benefits of doing the two gates? Should we do each of them this year? Should we do one this year, one next year? Should we do both next year? The same thing with the video security upgrades. The fountain is a question in and of itself. That's why it's pushed into that second year. And, you know, those are all subject to discussion as to, you know, what we want to do with each year. I don't think that this is a process that's any different than the city of Rye, the town of Rye, the village of Rybrook undergo every year, looking at what the capital needs are and how important they are. So,
Good.
Yeah, well,
okay.
I think I just wanted to add something really fast, and I think Jamie has something to say. I mean,
I was going to call on you, Jamie.
Just, you know, as we look at this, the pending grant funding items, I mean, that's a big list. And as we know, even those projects, you know, they may not be complete in 2023. So then looking ahead to this wish list, you know, it just seems like, I mean, I don't, well, some of them are small items, but the bigger ones, it just seems like we've got work to do. And it's almost unrealistic to put them in 2023 anyway. And I feel like it just gives everybody a ton of stress. So, you know, I feel like with this wish list capital plan, it's almost better to, I mean, you know, we don't need to designate the timeline, other than, you know, more urgent, less urgent.
Emily, I think that the purpose of the timeline is to show that we can do it over more than 1 year.
Yeah.
But the alternative is to just have one column with everything in it.
Well, actually, Emily raises something that is a good comparative point. We have something called a capital improvement plan, which is huge. But rather than booking things into years, we indicate urgency. So there's critical, high priority, and down through 3 or 4 grades. And what we're, for instance, funding at this point are only critical projects. And we're trying to fund them as best we can, as soon as we can, but we're not stuck on pigeonholing these things into particular years, which actually may not be practical from a financial perspective.
Just, and to that point, and I apologize for interjecting, but I know, for example, personally, something that drives me absolutely nuts about the park is the restrooms. I think they absolutely need to be updated, and I think if we look at this capital plan individually, we have, by not going forward with the bathhouse interior project, we have the most to lose, especially as it relates to the grant funds. So it's an 82 grand that we could potentially let expire and leave on the table there. And I just did some math based on the shares of that project. So if you were to take what is estimated as a total of 667,230, once, you use the grant funding, the 182, the city's contribution, the 39.278% would come to 262. So just so we, kind of have a sense of urgency, that's one way you might want to look at it, that we would be leaving 200 grand about, or close to 200 grand on the table, and that would just be, because I know the initial estimate is large for the city, but that's one way to kind of take a look at it and say, maybe we want to do it this year because.
Lindsay, I agree with you, but also that's why I asked Debbie to include this estimate. It's not final.
Mhm.
We're hoping to reduce that 850, which in turn would reduce the 667.
Well, that's another question I had for you, because you said, the projected contractor, isn't it subject to public bid, or?
What we have is a contractor that does work for the county and other municipalities, and they are, we'd basically be piggybacking on it. So we can work with them, and we think that the ultimate cost will be a lot less with them than by going to public bid and taking whatever's out there. So you can research them.
I know exactly who they are.
Okay.
I
figured.
I researched it when we first went through. That's why I was interested, because, yes.
All right. So they, and especially they do all this work, but their real claim to fame is they do the exterior masonry and stuccoing, which we need a lot of. So when we do the retaining wall and the exterior of the bathhouse, that's really their forte to do that, as well as they do all the other work, but that's really one of their big strengths. So I wanted them actually to do the ticket booth, but it was a project that was far too small for them. So, anyway, so that's what we're working with, and hopefully by next month, we'll have a more firm figure that we can go with and get approval of the commissioners and the blessing of, the city council and the town council on each hand, and we'll take care of that. The other items are obviously up for discussion. Can I recognize Jamie Jensen now?
Jamie Jensen, 588 Forest, City of Rye. Debbie does a fabulous job, and the staff does a fabulous job, but I think that we're being disingenuous to taxpayers. I don't understand at all, and I know you've talked about this for years, what the CDBG grant is paying for. Why would a ADA compliant grant pay for window replacement? So I think there needs to be a little bit more understanding of what that budget line is. The other thing I just wanted to say, and you all probably know more than I do, and I'm gonna just be quiet, and if you've done it, I'm gonna be quiet, but I feel like I'm listening to this, and I'm hearing Commissioner Jackson saying we're gonna lose money, but I don't really think the 850 is a real number, and I feel like the citizens deserve to have a very accurate view of what they're paying for if it ends up going to either the town of Rye taxpayers or the city of Rye taxpayers. The other thing I wanted to say is there's something very different between operating capital, year-to-year operating capital, and long-term capital. And I'm insulted to see seed and the hot water heaters and the two-way radios in this budget. It should be in your operating budget discussion. You guys should debate it. Maybe you decide you don't want to seed the lawn, but it should be part of the year-to-year operating budget and should not even be on this list.
And to that point, I think, typically for capital expenditures, there's usually a 5-year lifespan. I don't know. I mean, it would
We allocate capital based on what our accountants tell us is capital and not capital. In this case, it is. Jamie, I agree with you that this is a year-to-year expenditure. Not that we buy new radios every year, but we certainly do seating every year. And, you know, to that point, you know, I'm in agreement. Whether it's in the capital budget or whether it's in the operating budget, most of this stuff needs to be done. And you're right, it's something that we need to discuss whether, no matter what budget it's in. You had another, I'm sorry, what was the other thing you raised? I'm sorry.
I appreciate that you acknowledge my point, but the reality is having an operating budget conversation is by nature very different. And so by putting seed in the operating budget, you're having a conversation about what you think the cost of running a park should be from year to year. And so it's insulting to see those things that are not long-term capital expenditures not in the budget. It bothers me that we don't have a gardener for the Rye-Town Park to do the weeding of the beds, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a personnel, that's a big expense, I'm not going there. But we need to at least be genuine about what it costs to run a park. Seeds are part of an annual thing. Having the equipment for your security people should be part of your operating year to year. As far as the bathhouse goes, and this is me admitting my ignorance, but I think at this point, this conversation's been going on for so long, Debbie is juggling with her staff so many different grant applications. We're paying for the consultants to pay for it. It isn't clear what $850,000 has to do with ADA compliance. And I think that the taxpayers deserve that if we're gonna have to go, if I'm gonna have to go and be there for Emily and Josh, because I'm a park fan, and stand there in the audience and say, no, we really do need to put this in our City of Rye capital budget. I need to believe in it too, and I'm the biggest advocate of the park. So I think it's really important we figure out how to communicate some of this stuff a little bit more expansively.
Jamie, let me just go back because I remembered what I was going to say about what you said. What does it have to do with ADA? All of the things that we are mentioning as, you know, necessary for ADA was submitted in an application. There's nothing that is not in there. For example, making the permit office handicap accessible, moving it from where it is now into the bathhouse, doing the bathrooms. You can't look at every individual part of it. For example, putting new sinks in the bathroom is not technically all by itself ADA compliant, although some of the sinks may be a lower level to comply with wheelchair accessibility. But the other sinks, not necessarily. But yes, it is because it's part of an entire project. But what we discovered with the windows and why we moved it from the exterior application to the interior is because none of this can be done without new windows because it would make the interior watertight. You can't do the interior and put new walls in, new sheetrock, new whatever we're going to put in, whether it's tile or stucco on the walls, and allow the water to come in. So this becomes part of the project, a necessary part of the project. In fact, I would venture to say that of all the parts of the project right now, that's the single most important one and probably one of the most costly. That's why that's in there. So we're working hard, and you're right, we're juggling it. We're looking at different aspects of it because I think that having bathrooms, and Lindsay put her finger on it earlier, that's one thing that so many people use. And people don't like to go into public restrooms and feel that they're going into a dirty place. And that's one of the things when we did this building, we made sure that the bathrooms here are of first quality. And I would hope that the end product would be the same as, you know, as what we have in other places. Now, the permit office itself, moving that over there, is it essential? It's not as essential. You know, if it's a question of money and what do you do and what you do not do at this point, I would say, okay, let's get the bathroom done. Let's figure out a way to do the move the permit office in the future. Maybe with a grant, maybe the city and town can determine, well, we really need that and we should fund it, but that's a future discussion. Right now, we need to concentrate and make the bathhouse, at least the bathroom parts of the bathhouse, as, you know, as accessible and as nice as possible. And that's my view. I don't know if I speak for the
And
others.
to that point, Gary, and, you know, again, there's a couple of issues, you know, when you discuss ADA, there's a number of things. Size of stalls, I think, are the stalls all uniform in size at this point, Debbie?
No, there's one large one.
There's one large one, okay.
At least.
Oh, you mean the current bathroom?
Correct, yeah, so,
We have one ADA, we have, well, it's not ADA,
yeah,
we have one large stall in each bathroom.
one larger stall, but not an ADA compliant stall. So not every stall would be ADA compliant, but I will, and
And
I'm,
they would have to have things like push bars. and
correct,
Things
handle,
like the
yeah.
handles.
And
Our sinks are not
yeah.
ADA.
And forgive me, Mayor Cohen and Commissioner Hurd, I am, and please indulge me with this bathhouse discussion, because I remember running, God, almost 8 years ago when I first got elected, and one of the things I said was it drives me crazy to see the plumbing, without going into, you know, more of a graphic, but the plumbing in the restroom, in the women's restroom, in that bathhouse does not function appropriately. And it drives me.
You want to define appropriately?
Well,
No, don't.
so when you flush, sometimes things come back up and resurface, and that in 2022, it just drives me crazy. And in 2015, when I first ran, it drove me crazy. I feel extremely strongly about the park, the use of the park, and making sure that our residents, our taxpayers are comfortable going to the beach. And I know someone who is somewhat of a germaphobe myself. One of the reasons why I don't use that beach is because wherever I go, I'm constantly making sure there's a suitable restroom. I know, as crazy as that sounds, but this to me is something that, you know, and again, I know it's a tough budget season for us too. And I had this fight with Gary last night during our budget session, because not only is it a tough budget year for us as electeds, with increasing electricity, gas, utility, everything, costs are going up. We're trying to decipher, you know, what our mortgage tax income is going to be for this year, if the increase in interest rates are going to impact them, and what that impact is going to be. So, you know, with all of that being said, I still think that this one particular item is such an important, it's of such importance to the park, to the use of the park, to the comfort of the residents who wish to use the park, that I think that it rises to the level of discussion this year because of those reasons. So, and again, I understand wholeheartedly where you guys are coming from. I do get it, but I just think that if there was any project in my tenure here on the Rye Town Council, and, you know, that I would love to see, it's these restrooms, as crazy as that sounds.
I've used the restrooms year-round for many years, and I've never had a problem with them. I think they're old, but I don't think old means unclean, and I think the staff does a nice job keeping them clean. I mean, my personal favorite bathroom in all of Rye is in the library, and it's from about 1905. And you go in it on the second floor, and you feel like you're in, you know, a different generation, which you are. And so I have no problem with old, and I have a problem with our consumer culture that thinks everything has to be sparkling and brand new. I will say, if there's plumbing issues, that's definitely a different problem. And I will also say that I went to Playland, and they have beautiful new bathrooms that are spacious and state of the art, and they are great. So, you know, I appreciate, you know, a new nice bathroom. what I would like to look at is page 229 of 237, the pending grant funding page. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, one project is in 2024. We have 8 projects. The bathhouse exterior restoration, the cost to Rytown Park is $383,890. Beach level ADA restroom, $62,500. The pavilion terracotta, no cost. Tower admin, no cost. Tube fence, no cost. Storm mitigation, no cost. Promenade, no cost. Pond culvert, no cost. What is going on here in this next column, in these next rows, where we say City of Rye contribution? What is this 1.473 number?
From my quick look at it, I think it was just added instead of subtracted.
I don't understand what's added instead of subtracted. So what's our 39.278% share of these project costs?
That should be,
Because I think it should be 2 minus 1 point, so that number is wrong.
it should be 250 plus 62.5.
Yeah, that's right.
So hold on,
And conserve cash. So the total net cost, it added together the total cost and the grants instead of subtracting the grants from. My apologies.
no,
My
that's
error.
okay. 383,890 plus 6250 plus, that's it.
So
So
I
it's-
have a sheet that for some reason
It
says
should be.
total cost to
Right.
Rytown Park, 446,390.
On your sheet.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So that's the correct
That's what
number.
it should be.
And
That's why I was trying to understand what you were talking about before, Josh.
Yeah.
It's not the sheet in my agenda package, but it's the sheet that I printed off the agenda package on the line.
Okay, so-
online, which has the correct number.
Which is 39% is, so that's $175,000. Is that right, Josh,
I
basically?
have 175,333 is what's on my printout.
Okay, so I just want, as we're talking about this, to understand exactly where we're at. So the City of Rye, assuming we get these projects completed in 2023, our contribution is 175,
Right,
and what's 450?
333.
333? Okay, thank you. Oh, no, I'm sorry, what's, I want to understand the town of Rye, 450 minus
They're
175.
271.
275, yeah. Okay, so to Lindsay's question about why the city is having an issue with paying for the bathrooms, it's because we have committed to $175,000 in projects.
Well, it still has to go through our budget
Budget.
process.
Right, but we've,
Soft circle, yes.
yes. Okay, so,
Well, Emily, before you continue, just one addition. We're not committing to this because this is pending grant funding. If we don't get a grant for the bathhouse exterior restoration, which is 405 for the shower area, and the exterior of 362 or 363, and we don't get a grant for the beach level ADA restroom of 250, then the contribution of the city is zero.
correct. I'm assuming that we're gonna get these grants. I hope that we do, and I hope we can move these
Let's
important
hope.
projects forward. But and I understand that we have grant money sitting in a pot waiting to be spent. Can you remind me what the deadline is for using those funds again?
I'm not sure, it's 5 years from the time we signed the contract for the CFA, I'm not sure what the CDBG.
And there's no COVID delay or extension or anything?
We can always ask for an extension,
Okay,
but we're already getting pressure from the county saying, give us your final price, we wanna issue the contract, et cetera.
so is that the only CDBG grant that we have?
No, the beach mats,
The beach mats, but we have those. I mean, we're waiting for somebody to
we're
sign
just waiting to
something.
sign the contract. We already have the contract for the bathhouse.
If I may, the CDBG grants for the bathroom and for the ADA project, those are part of the tranche that was 2018, 2019, 2020 that tranche, that's that 3-year tranche. I may have the
Yeah.
years probably wrong, but it ended. That's over. The next 3-year tranche started, and that's where the bath mats, the mats are included. That those funds have not arrived from HUD yet to the
Okay.
county.
So I'm just focusing on the bathhouse here. So we're not exactly sure, we're getting some pressure, we can accept the grants, or we can accept the mats, we can accept without doing anything at the bathhouse, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
That's a totally separate, in other words, the CDBG is federal money doled out by the county. And we get that by belonging to the Urban County Consortium, which has a separate allocation than the state of New York
Mhm.
does. So
Um,
we get that, and
and what's the match on the CDBG grant?
50%.
50%, okay. And then we've got the ECF, what's the match on that grant?
50%.
50 and 50. So, I mean, even if we were to find a project that cost $182,000, the city would, Rytown Park would be on the hook for 90,000.
Correct.
In which case, then we'd split it,
Yeah,
40, 60. You know, I mean, I'm not speaking for the city of Rye, but to me, that seems like a more palatable number, which is still a lot to ask, I think, considering the $175,000 we're amenable to on the next page. So I don't know. If Lindsay feels so strongly about it, I think we need to get to a number.
No, and I'm happy to work and see what we can work out. I think that's the best solution. We're not gonna get everything that everyone wants, but I'm happy to work with you and see what we can do to sort of improve the current interior of the bathhouse, or how
But
we
I would
can-
also, yeah, like to know what's the sort of latest that we can have with the CDBG? You know, how much time do we have?
I don't know, we'd have to speak with them. What they do, and one reason the number is 100,000, is a couple of years ago, they were asking, there are some communities that did not use all of their money. And we were at a meeting, and I said, well, if they're not gonna use the money, we'll be happy to take it. That's how we got another 30,000. It was
Mhm.
originally a 70,000 grant that became a 100,000 grant. So the bottom line is, if we don't use the money, we're gonna lose it. Am I saying that we need to do it within the next 3 weeks? No.
No, but I think what Emily's saying is let's find out when the use it or lose it point is.
Right.
Yeah, no,
I think we all understand
Yeah.
Okay.
I
there's
would-
that pressure.
I would also like to add to that point too, just to kind of get a broader picture of if we don't use it, if we happen to lose it, what are the odds that if we were to decide, let's say we have a great year fiscally, both the city and the town, and we're raking it in, and we say, geez, now we really want to spend it. If we were to apply for it again in another year or so, what our odds would be? Are we totally, are they going to take it and say, we're not going to even look at it because we already gave it to them and they didn't use it?
That's the most likely thing.
I just don't want to
Yeah.
hurt our odds for the future
No,
if that
that-
becomes.
That's
I
why,
don't think anyone wants to
Yeah.
really talk about losing it.
No, I know, I'm just saying.
But I just want to highlight one other issue, and this is sort of fundamental to, I think, the city of Rye's concern over the way that we do things, which is, it's really hard to say, no, we're not gonna take a grant once we get it. And so in planning, what I would like to be doing is to apply for grants where we have, buy-in from the town of Rye and the city of Rye, the two participants in the capital expenditure program, right? Because it puts us in a bad position to say, we can't afford to pay our share, so we don't want to take that grant this year. And I think that's something we've tried to articulate in the past. And so this bathhouse interior seems to keep coming up as this you know, sort of, I don't know what's that word that I'm looking for. It's highlighting the issues that we're having with the process that we're using, I think.
Well, I think it's difficult because, you know, we're a separate commission, and the city and the town each have separate boards that have to vote on capital expenditures. And some of these things come up fairly quickly as to putting applications in, and we have to do them pretty far in advance. The fact is, though, that we have done that, and I think that we have discussed, before we put in an application, we do get a resolution from the commission to go forward. And I know that we've had discussions, and we continue to have discussions about the city and the town, you know, participating in it. I know you and Josh have raised this repeatedly, and I have tried to be very cognizant of the concerns of the city,
Yeah.
You know, in doing this. The one thing I think we can all say is all of the projects, whether we're expecting a SAM grant and no contribution, or whether we're expecting, you know, something like the exterior, you know, the retaining wall, I think we're all in agreement that these are projects that really need to get done. And so we support them. I think the question is, you know, how do we pay for it? And when
Right.
do we pay for it? And that's the reason that I'm bringing this up now in the September meeting, is I am cognizant that the city has a budgeting
Yeah,
process.
thank you.
And that's why I wanted to put this in writing now, so that there's, you know, no surprise as to what the numbers might be, because most of the numbers have been solid estimates, except for that bathhouse interior number. We think we know what the costs are gonna be. We're looking, if we do get the grants, what the obligation would be, when we are, you know, when we would foresee that the work would be done. And to an earlier conversation, yes, it's in the 2023 budget, but it's more likely that it's gonna go, you know, a little bit further. If it is in 2023, it'll probably be towards the end of the year, by the time you go through your, you know, your contract signing. That takes the longest time. Once you get the grant, then you have to negotiate the contract, either with the state, let's say with the Parks Department.
Mhm.
You have to get the contract, and then, you know, that takes a number of months. And then you say, okay, now we have it. Now you gotta do a final design. You have to have an engineer or an architect make the design. Then when that's done, then you gotta go out to bid for the most part. And that all takes up the better part of a year.
Just speaking about bids, certainly what I think that we're all concerned about and perhaps experiencing is that bids are coming in much higher
Much higher.
than expectations. And so as we look at this, I think in addition to the points that everybody else has already made, we do have to be concerned about where our bids are going to come in and what real costs are going to be.
Costs in,
Well, to
Terms
that
of costs.
extent, Josh, you're absolutely right. And with some of these numbers, when we were putting it in, and we thought that it would be a certain number, I instructed Debbie and the others, I say, we gotta allow for inflation. You gotta increase this number by 10%. So the numbers are, hopefully will come in where we need it to be, but we're not even gonna be sure of that. We just don't know until the bids come in. I always say that when we go out to bid on a project. You know, the number can be the estimate, but when you get the bids in, you don't know. Sometimes we're actually surprised that it came in lower, but most of the time it's, where did this number come from? I don't know how many times we've had to bid both in the town, I'm sure the city and the village have also encountered this, where the bids come in and you say, well, maybe we should rebid this. Maybe we should talk to other contractors, see if we can get new bids.
I've never
Just as a
experienced
quick
that.
question, Mary, because you said you were kind of working to maybe whittle down the project or whittle down the cost. How close are you to that?
We just had a discussion with the contractor today, the architect. I'm hopeful that by next month we'll have a much more definite number then we can go. And if we know that number before that, I'm not gonna wait till the meeting, I'll let everybody know, this is what we're gonna do, this is what's proposed to do, this is what we think it's gonna cost, this is what the scope is, and how it's changed from the 850.
Can I just
I
pose?
apologize, but I'm gonna have to run.
You have to be there at 7:30.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Well, we're not
apologize.
taking a vote
We'll see you
anyway.
guys very soon.
Yeah, no.
Jason, thank
See
you.
Jason, bye-bye.
This is yours? Yes, thank you.
Just, and again, this is just sort of my own mental exercise, but I think over the years, and I've seen this happen time and time again, where the city of Rye and the town of Rye are kind of meet at this point where our, our interpretations of what need to be done at the park can differ to an extent. I think, what you brought up, Commissioner Hurd, in discussion with the grant applications, I get where you're coming from, and sort of maybe having more control or oversight of that process, triaging the projects. I was wondering if you'd be interested in working with me, perhaps Debbie and your city manager, I think it's
Greg
Usry, in developing a more formal process, planning process and cost estimate, et cetera, so that, because I feel like we keep getting stuck at this one point, and, in the interim, the infrastructure of the park kind of suffers. So I would be more than happy to kind of work together to see if there is more of a formal process where we can, elicit more input from the city council, elicit more input from the town council, and kind of come to more of an agreement, more of a game plan that both bodies can follow.
The process that I think we're getting very close to a process that we're looking for, but the unknowns having to do with a huge list of potential projects, and what we have been trying to do is, where a project is brought up on a sufficiently timely basis, as was the case with bathhouse exterior, beach level ADA restroom, is get our city council to informally say, these are things that we think should be done, but we can't say at this point where they'll fit in our budget, because our budget is obviously a point of concretizing everything. And that budget process is actually beginning now, takes place annually.
Yep.
And so it's possible for us to now take those items and put them in our budget process of necessity, because we're not sure that the council is on board with this. We'll also put in the hopper the bathhouse interiors, and we'll see how that survives a budget process that's going to have in it everything from, well, as I said before, dredging Milton Harbor to replacing our failing salt shed.
And like I said, I'm lifelong resident of the village of Mamaroneck, so I know how important the dredging and the flood mitigation is. And my door is always open. I'm always happy to work with you guys just to get the, everything in order and make it easier for us to facilitate.
Thank you.
I just wanted to put that out there. And
I have a question. To what extent does the audit invoice, the audit-generated invoice to the city of Rye, is that when it arrives, which is generally in the late summer or the fall, following the fiscal year in which the audit is recorded, do you accrue that to the preceding year, or do you, when it's paid, is it in the year in which you've received it?
I don't know the answer to it. I know that we're still looking for detail on the receivable that the park has, how should I put it, voiced with respect to a prior year or years. But in order for the money to be in our budget for the next year, we need to know what the sum is in the autumn of the year prior to the year that we will need to spend.
Where I'm going with that is there's almost a 1-year lag.
Right.
So right now, you might not be thinking about the 2023 budget. You might be thinking about the 2024 budget, because that's when the bill will arrive, unless we can't fund the project. And aside from the seawall year, we've pretty much been able to fund on a cash basis the project, and then the bill comes to the city and the town after the audit is complete.
Yeah, there's another way to do it. I don't want to get into it now. We can discuss it offline. But I think it's a good idea. I think that we've made a lot of progress in how we're approaching this. As I said earlier, my purpose is to get all of this on paper now so everybody can
Right.
see it and decide. You know, there are things in here on the current budget that the staff definitely would like to see. Whether the commission agrees is something to be discussed. The staff can talk about, write a memo, we need this because we need it this year, or this can wait until next year, and we'll go over it. And that'll be something to be discussed. To Jamie's point, Debbie, I'd like to discuss with our accountants those items that are a yearly basis and whether or not we should move them into operational rather than capital. You know, for example, the seed. And Jamie picked up quickly on that. And when I saw a seed in the capital budget, I was kind of wondering about it myself, because we do it every year. It's in the budget every year. Unlike, for example, the sand, which we haven't had to replace now. Well, we have to replace it now. We're asking for a FEMA reimbursement on it. But, you know, I remember the first 2 years when I was supervisor, we had to put a lot of sand back, and then not so much. So
I remember
that's certainly
having a whole discussion with the accountants at the time that we thought it should be operating, and they insisted because the amount of expenditure that it should be in capital.
Gary, I'm gonna have to leave.
we're going to end the meeting. It's okay. Let's just go over. All right, we finished with, if there are no other comments, we finished with the capital discussion, which is all it is a discussion. Does anybody have any question on the management report or the financial statement?
I just had one question on the financials. It looks like, you know, year over year, we are, you know, operating at a variance of negative $450,000, but we budgeted that. And it looks like per our 2022 budget, we have a surplus. And I'm just trying to understand. I guess I was concerned because I remembered when we did the thing with the permit holders only on weekends and whatever, to address crowd issues. I knew that we had lost some revenue in those periods. But so we're operating into surplus, is that, can we?
That is what the financial statement is saying, yes.
Okay,
We're
so-
operating a surplus
So,
of 237,458, if I've got my column correct.
yeah,
Yeah, that's where we are in actual, as of now. As of August.
That's going to go down because we're not going to be taking any more revenue in, and we still will have.
expenses.
Expenses.
Okay, so that's why the pro rata is less.
There will be some revenue in September, so that number will change a little bit.
A little bit, okay, but so
And-
we're gonna have a surplus this year, probably.
I hope so.
Fingers crossed.
There are a number of
excuse me,
revenue
Debbie,
items that
what
have
we-
not been
What we
realized.
sometimes consider surplus, the accountants might not.
Yeah, the
Depending-
auditors just
when
find
they-
a way.
They find a way to move the figures in ways that I don't understand.
Yeah. But there are a number of revenue items that haven't hit at this point. We could very well end up with a check from FEMA or two before December 31st. We've got our concessions. We'll continue to throw off some revenue that we'll be able to book.
All right, before we adjourn, just one more thing. There's a memo on revenue update that a loan prepared just yesterday, I believe. And you can take a look at the comparisons year over year of the various fees, et cetera, that show that revenue is up, but permits are down. And
Do we have this? Is it in here? No.
yeah, it's in.
It is in there, yes.
Oh, I see it. I'm sorry. Okay, I missed that.
And I find it interesting that the residency breakdown of daily admission passes. 69% non-resident, 31% resident. On the daily passes. Just find that very interesting.
He does great work. It's always interesting to read his reports.
Yep.
I'll take a more careful look at that one
Okay,
tonight.
next meeting is October 18th. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.